Welcome to Dystopia, where we'll teach you how to become rich, famous, and beautiful. No, just kidding. But welcome to the very first episode of Dystopia. I am Dr. Fraser MacDonald, a New Zealand-born anthropologist and writer with an enormous and lifelong passion for music, having DJ'd and collected records for over 20 years. I conceptualized this series to illuminate not only the music but also the philosophy of those artists in the global techno community that I consider to be making important and unique artistic contributions to the development of the genre. So within such an aesthetically minimalist genre like techno, which utilizes a sparse and highly particular sonic palette, it is easy to overlook the fact that there exist visionary artists who are creating a thoroughly unique musical world which is unmistakably their own. For the untrained ear, it might seem that all techno music sounds the same, but close attention reveals an entirely different picture. In exactly the same way that we might instantly recognize Tony Allen's syncopated drum lines, Bootsy Collins's rubbery bass grooves, or Miles Davis's languid, muted horn, so too is it possible to immediately identify a techno artist by the character of a synth pattern, the specific tone of a kick drum, the crunch and rattle of percussion, or the darkness and intensity of the atmosphere being conjured. All of these are the sonic signatures of the artist, the oral elements that organically and necessarily express who they are and how they see the world, all expressed in their music. So, in a nutshell, Dystopia is all about presenting the unique musical worlds created by techno artists, defining the main attributes of those worlds, and exploring how and why they have come into existence. Each episode will feature a particular artist, including a selection of their essential tracks curated by myself, as well as a short interview with the artist themselves, which will seek to illuminate how they approach their art. So, what is dystopia? Probably most people will be familiar with what existential conditions that the word points to. On the one hand, there is the idea of a utopia, a paradisical, morally spotless world characterized by limitless happiness, freedom, and prosperity. Dystopia stands as the pure antithesis of utopia, a world that is equally pure but in its corruption. Dystopia is an utterly corroded, devastated world that has been bleached of hope and humanity. This is the kind of society depicted in popular movies like Blade Runner, The Matrix, Running Man, or books like 1984 or Brave New World. To be clear, I don't think we're currently living in a dystopia, but it is equally certain that our collective trajectory points towards one. One by one, every element of life is being monetized. This is a process that Marx called real subsumption, where the capitalist mode of production leaks out from offices and factories, which are the traditional spaces of work, into every facet of lived existence. This process amounts to a poisoning of our lived experience, as there are fewer and fewer spaces where we are free from the insistent, rapacious grasp of the market. Capital becomes the hand that guides all action. Techno is the soundscape of this society in decay. To be sure, the music is not happy, nor is it beautiful. In essence, it is dark, deeply repetitive, claustrophobic, deranged, and intense, all characteristics that make the music unbearable for many people. The image of reality created by this musical atmosphere is of humanity approaching its endpoint within a society completely saturated by corporate interests. Does the music then amount to nothing more than a celebration of societal demise? Absolutely not. As well as painting a picture of social disintegration, in a more important sense, techno embodies an extremely liberating path out of this suffocation. As a form of music, techno is strongly opposed to to the commercialized, formulaic forms of music that now dominate modern societies. What is a contemporary pop song? An irresistibly catchy hook, thickly sexualized speech, a meticulously arranged video designed for hyperstimulation, all of which are designed for the maximization of profit. Pop music is no longer art, it is simply music co-opted by capitalism. Techno has no words, no videos, no choruses, no verses, nothing catchy, nothing that makes listening easy or instantly gratifying. It is a musical form, not of language, organization, and feelings, but it is an abstract map of space composed of speeds, intensities, energies, and movement. It constitutes what French philosopher Gilles Deleuze calls a plane of immanence, the platform of energy that underpins everything that exists. The sounds within a techno arrangement are more like passing particles, pulses, surges of energy, bursts of light, or engulfing shadows, than they are anything obviously human. Techno is never a song. It never provides definite musical, thematic, or emotional coordinates. Rather, in essence, it is always an image of space and provides a sense of movement through space. The music, therefore, removes us from the dominant codes of society and places us in an alternative reality. This extends to how the music is consumed too. There are no bright colors, no spotlight on the DJ, no selfies on the dance floor, no quick beer after work and make it home so I can wake up early tomorrow. The environment, like the music, leads away from mainstream capitalist society. It is minimal, dark, preferably underground, preferably concrete, and it occurs when the regular world is asleep or enjoying their bourgeois pleasures. All of these factors are what makes the music extremely political too, charting out a way of life that is starkly opposed to the mainstream. The best techno maps out a dystopian space within which humans are radically liberated, breaking away from dominating structures towards open fields of abstract energy. Today on the show we will be focusing on the music of Lakej, who is a producer based in Stockholm, Sweden. It is no coincidence that this series begins with Lakej, since to my thinking he is, without question, a producer whose musical output consistently exhibits a degree of depth, power, and distinctiveness that is rarely found in the scene. Making this episode forced me to consider his music even more closely than I had before, and through this examination I've become even more convinced of how brilliant it is. Having made his debut as an artist in 2017 with the Structural Cohesion EP on Barcelona label Grey Report, Lakej has now established himself among the vanguard of global techno producers, having released material on esteemed outlets such as Felt Section, Soma Records, Semantica, Nackstrom Schallplatten, Edit Select, Mind Trip, and Recorded Things. Last year he took his journey into the music world even deeper with the creation of his own label Solitär, which to date has generated 6 releases, including 2 of his own EPs, Everything is Transitory and All is Metaphor. Perhaps to a greater extent than any other current producer, Lakej's music is instantly recognizable. Aesthetically, his tracks possess a richly metallic texture, extremely synthetic, yet without being in any way abrasive. This is exemplified first and foremost by the rhythmic, percussive elements of his tracks, that thud, rattle, and clang like a rusty intergalactic freighter plowing through the cosmos. The middle and upper frequencies are also carefully shaped. Most often, Lakej places a textured, continuous drone in the background, conjuring an atmosphere of immense pressure combined with the release of yellow, poisonous gases. The sound entraps and engulfs. Bleak synth motifs are also a staple of his sound, and in some of his tracks we are treated to the repeated, stifled cries of demented synthesizers calling out from the beyond. One of the most significant aspects of his music is its tempo. At the current point in time, the techno scene is increasingly imprisoned by the tyranny of 140 beats per minute, a speed that has become the default for aspiring producers and club crowds alike. Lakej's music stands out as a crushingly sluggish departure from this formula. His tracks do not race, they do not sprint, they do not run, but they march insistently like a futuristic army on their way into battle. With that, let's move on to my interview with Lakej, where he shares his thoughts about how he got into techno, his creative process, the meanings and moods behind his music, as well as talking about his new record label Solitär. So let's get into it. How did you get started with the techno scene? Did you grow up listening to techno, or did you come at it from a different path? Or
when I was just starting going out clubbing when I was 18, 19, it was mostly this was 99, that 2000 kind of era of hip hop was huge, dancehall was huge, that's what we went clubbing, and we were out writing graffiti and stuff, so it's that kind of, wild kind of youth culture around it. Graffiti was also really big at the time, and I've been skateboarding since I was 10, and that kind of, all those kind of things just kind of intermingled, kind of worked out together in a way, and then slowly but surely drum and bass came into the picture, and that was really blowing up early 2000s. So we started to go into a bunch of drum and bass clubs, and then we started kind of migrating towards the techno scene. And back then there was some really big underground clubs, which was great. I remember both Ben Clark and Marcel Deckman played here a lot during that time, and it was all just warehouse parties, which was really cool. So that got me into it more and more, but it wasn't until I was in art school, when I was 25 or something, a couple years later, that I was doing a lot of psychedelics. And then the person I lived with, he DJs, and he'd been DJing techno for years. So he used to get the feeling and the vibe for it. So he stood there and mixing dub techno and shit, and while we were on trips, totally, yeah. Especially a mix of acid and mushrooms,
absolutely.
You're going places. After that, I was I gotta figure out how this works. I gotta understand it, I just needed. It was the same kind of thing of seeing skateboarding for the first time. I gotta learn that. And then seeing graffiti for the first time, and holy shit, I want to do that. I need to understand it. I need to figure it out. And then, I got the same thing from techno, and techno stayed with me.
I guess at some point you became a lot more serious about producing techno, and you really started to move into it more seriously.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But this was years later. So I think it wasn't until so dub techno was the thing that got me really into it, and I started building hardware, because listening to all these kind of really cool dub techno stuff, back then Maurizio stuff, basic channel things, Decode and all that stuff from Detroit, it sounded so hardware based, so I was if I need to start building a hardware setup so I can create these sounds, space echoes and whatnot. Yeah, so that's kind of got me into it, and then the modular thing got me into the more kind of electronic sounding sounds, away a little bit from the dub techno thing. Dub techno got very like you can only take it so far, and
sure,
like the stuff that's out there was already like at the verge of the best of the stuff that you could actually get out of that kind of very, very limited concept, you know. So I felt like, and then I don't know, all of a sudden it was like 2014, 2015, and like the whole pole group thing blew up, and
Oscar Mulera.
Yeah, that sound was like just all over the place, and I was like, yeah, this is fucking it. That's
totally
that's still what I'm writing on. It's still like what I'm exploring, I think.
That's
cool. Like the stuff that inspired me back then.
I think that your sound is like super, like instantly recognizable. Like you really have a very distinct sound that really stands out. Is there like a particular way of thinking behind your music? I mean, is it just you just making music without thinking so much, or are you actually, you know, do you think there's something, you know, deeper in your sound?
Oh, that's such a good question. You can approach it from so many perspectives, I think. Like, what perspective you're catching me from? Like, it's kind of like, since I'm coming from the art school world, you know, like that's more, for me it was always the idea that if I could figure out like a concept or process that I could throw like anything into, and if the process is tight enough, like something that is cohesive and interesting will come out of that process. Sort of like with conceptual art, like you have this little kind of frame of the initial idea, and then you start scratching on the surface, and all of a sudden like a whole world starts developing through this kind of cause and effect thing. Like I did this, now I need to do that because that's an answer. Like it's, so it's a very abstract approach, I think, but also very concrete in that for me it's always been about the process, like having a healthy process that I enjoy being in. So yeah, it's almost like, and you can take that so far and just dumb it down to the extent of, as long as I can be in the studio and fiddle about with sound, I'm happy. And whatever I do that's comes out of there is going to be part of this kind of how do you say it? Like this concept that is Lakej, in a way.
And are you trying to like in your music, I mean, are you trying to like intentionally create a specific atmosphere, or, you know, even like a particular image of like space and these?
Not really. I think it's more about like coming to a place with a project where it sounds good to me and I feel intrigued by it. So there's no like particular point of inspiration. It's more like the inspiration comes from working in the studio and trying things out, and all of a sudden something clicks and it's like, yeah, this is very functional now. And that's when it kind of falls into place, like almost like a jigsaw puzzle. But I never really, like in the beginning, sure, I might have had some ideas of like, this is what I want to sound like, this is what I'm going for, but no, it's never like that. It's more like, it's almost like, back then I was very, like, I just listened to this really interesting lecture with a Danish artist, like a painter, he's called Tall R. He has such a good philosophy about this idea of what's good art. And he's like, if you're painting and you know what you're gonna get at the end, like that's bad art, because then you're taking responsibility throughout your whole process. And that's kind of what it was in the beginning. Like I was very specific, but also like I was also limited to not knowing too much about it. So what came out was very restricted to my limitations at the point, which also became something interesting in itself, I think. And if I had knew a lot more back then, it wouldn't have been as interesting, because it still had that experimental kind of side to it.
More like open-ended.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's more almost like, if I don't ever want to know what track I'm trying to make, it's kind of like, that will show itself through the process, and eventually it starts to kind of be something that I never expected, and like, okay, shit, this is cool, I will, like, you know, finish this. But that's the thing, like, if I start being fully responsible for what's gonna come out, it's gonna die in a way and not be that interesting.
Yeah, I guess you lose the spontaneity.
Yeah, and you also lose this, like the element of surprising yourself with something that you never would have expected or imagined yourself. And that's, I think, it's very intriguing and interesting to me. That's when I'm starting like to go further with my sound, and that's kind of the natural evolution of it in a way, you know, like how it evolves and how it grows and how it, like, you know.
Moving on to talk about your label, Solitär.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I felt like I needed to build up a platform for that, what intrigues me, that's local, you know, out of necessity, right? Like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested because, I mean, obviously you have no trouble having your tracks released on really great labels across Europe. So I was just wondering, you know, was there a particular artistic motivation behind doing it? That you wanted your own musical identity separate from those labels?
In a way, yeah. Maybe. No, I don't know. That's also a really good question.
I don't know. I'm just curious.
No, yeah. That's great. I love it. No, I don't think it's been like about my freedom of expression, because I feel like I found my homes with the labels I'm releasing at, and they got my back, and like they're really into what I'm doing, which is great. So it more felt like I have such a big network now of artist friends and up and coming guys, and especially from doing classes and all that stuff. So I just wanted to create a platform for them, basically, for like knowing that I have so many contacts with people who are making the music that I find interesting. So it felt like a no-brainer in that regard. Like I mean, why not? Like, opportunity kind of thing. Like, I thought about making a label for many years, but then it never really felt like the timing was right. I really didn't feel like I had the backing of the network around me. So, but now it's like, yeah, everything
that's cool.
kind of just flows.
Yeah, and I guess for you, putting out 12 inches as well is quite a special part of that process.
Yeah, so far I just only dared to put out my own stuff on 12 inch on the label.
Yeah.
But definitely, if it starts selling really well, then of course I will put on other people's art on 12 inch as well.
And was there a reason behind calling it Solitär, or was that just a name that you thought sounded cool?
A bit of both. I think it was also about the fact that, like, yeah, I'm definitely a loner for the kind of music I'm making here in Stockholm. Like, most of my musical contacts are in Germany, Spain, Portugal, like Italy, like they're all over the world. The US, of course, Australia. Like, it's so scattered. But basically, there's not that many here in Stockholm that I'm like connecting with, and there's not a clique or crowd here. So yeah, it's about that. I think it's like, yeah, me doing something out of solidarity, right? So yeah, if you want to make a career in Stockholm from like DJing a lot, then yeah, house is your friend for sure.
So which artists, either working now or in the past, like within the techno scene, which would you say are, you know, the ones that you respect the most, and who have like had the strongest influence on you musically?
That's a good question too. Like with techno, people come and go over the years. but some who has stuck around, like obviously like Rico, Louis Fozzi, like those kind of core guys from the Pole Group era that are still doing it, like still influence a lot, I think. But then there's so many people who are pushing it in such interesting ways. Like you got this guy NWHR.
Yeah.
People. I guess it's nowhere, but yeah.
Yeah, his stuff is insane.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then there's this new guy called Nemesis who does really, really brutal things. And like, there's so many people like coming in with this, like, just coming at it with a new personal perspective and making something that really like, holy shit, this is great. I want to make something again. I want to keep pushing my sound. Like Puka also does some really, really cool stuff as far as sound design goes. So I think if you can get like your personality to shine through, or maybe not the personality per se, but if you have something like personal about the sound, like you're not afraid to just trust your own taste and what's good to you, and not be afraid that your personal ideas are gonna like sort of your filter is gonna mask whatever comes out. That kind of honest expression will always be intriguing, I think.
Totally agree. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fundamental. I agree.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on like the hard groove stuff that's now become like super popular?
I can't hate on it because it's still music that's connecting people. Like if people are going like, if they're dancing to grooves or if they're just jumping up and down to hard stuff, like for me, it you have that punk mentality about things, like coming from as a kid going to like you're in the same generation, right? So like when Offspring was blowing up, Bad Religion, all that stuff, like back in those days, like Green Day was taking off, like post Nirvana, like post grunge.
Sure.
Like I like I hate that stuff now, but back then it was like, it was huge, and it was something that like connected people a lot. And we went to these concerts and were so hyped on it as like 15-year-old kids, like holy shit, this is insane. So I think everything has its crowd and it needs to have it, and it's kind of.
I agree with you though. I think when as long as like people are listening to music and enjoying it, then that's all good. I mean,
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then if your music interest takes you further than just like the weekly Spotify playlists, then good on you. Like you're gonna have a world of exploration and intrigue ahead of you for the rest of your life, because you're gonna have an interest in digging for music. But then again, like I heard someone say in an interview that I don't remember who it was now, but like the majority of people who listen to music use Spotify because they just don't want it to be silent. Like they don't care what it is they're listening to, right? Like that's
they just want sound.
Yeah, they just want something to not be quiet, distracted from what's going on in their head, And I think it was the same with radio when we were kids, and like with television for like our parents' generation, and like all that kind of thing, So
yeah, right. It kind of fills in the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you get like a little bit of entertainment. You're less alone. You're when I'm painting, like I'm having on a podcast or something and listening to people talk about whatever, usually something art focused or creative process focused or something like that, because that's what intrigues me. Like, and that's what I find inspiration in. I think like tying back to what inspires me for music and so on, not music, but rather hearing, like, I don't know, listening to Brian Eno talk for an hour about the creative process. Like that inspires me.
Yeah, right.
That's like
kind of philosophical side of it.
Yeah, and how people approach being in the process, and that could be any kind of creative process. Like I think that's what I thrive on. Like the releasing, the DJing, like the all of that other stuff is basically just almost a byproduct of being able to be in the process.
Okay, I want to thank Lakej very much for accepting my invitation to participate in this inaugural episode of Dystopia. Hope you enjoyed the interview and learning about his creative process, his approach to music, and also about his new record label Solitär. Make sure to go on to his Bandcamp and check it out, because there's a lot of great stuff on there. Okay, right now we are going to slide into a mix of Lakej's music. I have assembled a few tracks into a 30-minute mix, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you for listening to this episode, and stay tuned for more to come.